Welcome to Dead Pets, the podcast about pet grief that celebrates the lives of the creatures who have changed ours. If you enjoy Dead Pets, if it's touched something in your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. It's a really small thing you can do that means everything to me and will help Dead Pets keep growing. I love making this show. I feel like this is my purpose. This is fulfilling to me in a way that nothing has ever been, and I'm a journalist, a writer. I love my work, but talking to people about their pets that have died, who they still love so much, has been life-changing for me. Hearing from people that the podcast has touched them, has made their grief lighter, and has made the memories of their pets less painful is so cool and so special to me. For more Dead Pets, follow Dead Pets on Instagram and TikTok. There you can find pictures and videos of pets featured in each episode. And Dead Pets now has a newsletter. After every episode is recorded, edited, and published, for me, the story keeps going. Every interview prompts these new feelings, friendships, and epiphanies about our lives with our pets and what comes after. The newsletter is published once a month, and I share reflections and thoughts from each episode, my own grief journey from losing Dodge, my precious cat who was with me for 20 years, adventures of letting myself fall in love with a new kitten, news about the podcast, book reviews, other resources about pet grief, and I also include a roundup of fun pet news from around the internet, because who doesn't want that? If that sounds like something your heart needs, you can subscribe at www.deadpetspodcast.com. The newsletter is $5 a month or $40 a year. We also have a free tier where you can access some of this content. Today, I'm celebrating a little bit because we have our first ever partner. Tail Chapter is a free platform that gives you one place to celebrate, care for, and keep track of your pet. In just 1 minute, you can create a profile for your pet where you can save photos and memories, track important health information, set care reminders, and keep emergency information handy. You can also turn those memories into custom keepsakes so the story of your best friend lives somewhere beyond your camera roll. I said goodbye to Dodge a few months ago, and one of the hardest things about missing him is looking for pictures of him. It's only been a few months, but when I pull out my phone to look at photos of my sweet boy, I scroll and I scroll and I scroll and I scroll until I find him. It's hard to explain how seeing the photos of my daily life pass without a single new photo of him feels devastating all over again. With Tail Chapter, I can keep the story of him somewhere beyond my camera roll, and I can also turn those memories into custom keepsakes. So whether your pet is still stealing your spot on the couch or you're looking for a meaningful way to remember the one you've lost, Tail Chapter helps you keep their whole story in one place. Dead Pets has partnered with Tail Chapter to give away 1 year of premium access to one listener per episode of Season 2 of Dead Pets. That is a value of $74.99, and this is what you get. Unlimited pet profiles and photos, a health journal with expense tracking, care reminders, so a dashboard alert, plus email reminders the day before an appointment, food and activity log. You can share temporary view-only links with pet sitters and dog walkers, a 5% discount in the shop, unlimited personality reports, care tips, and memorial stories, and more. To enter to get that 1 free year of premium, sign up for the Dead Pets newsletter at www.deadpetspodcast.com. You do not have to sign up for the paid tier of the newsletter. You can sign up for the free tier, and the winner will be randomly selected. Entries for each episode will open the day the episode airs and close 6 days later. So if you sign up for the newsletter today until next Wednesday, you will be in the running. In the meantime, check out tailchapter.com. Today's episode has a few issues with sound quality. On Athena's end, her computer fan was running really loud, and during recording, we just couldn't get around it. I did my best editing to make the quality as good as possible. I think it sounds pretty good considering, but if you guys notice a difference in quality, that is why. And I hope that you enjoy this episode because I really loved hearing the love story of Athena and Precious Roy. On today's episode, Athena tells us about a very special boy named Precious Roy.
The legendary Precious Roy. I had transferred from Pratt in Brooklyn to the museum school in Boston. It was the first time that I was living on my own. And at the time I was 19. I had done my first semester at the museum school and gone back to where my mother lived, which was Virginia Beach, Virginia. I was there for the winter holiday break, and there were arrangements made for my best friend to come visit for New Year's. On Monday, December 21st, 1998, my mother woke me up and said, Antonio is here. He was my best friend at the time. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, Antonio's here. Come get up. He's here. I went out into the living room and there was a bird cage. And inside that cage was Precious Roy, who was not named for a while after I got him because I was astonished. I think the words were, "Mom, it's a bird." And she said, "Yes, it's a gift." So Roy was given to me. The reason he was gifted was because my mother had gone to the local big box pet store to get some supplies for her aquariums. While she was there, she observed a plexiglass octagon where they had cockatiels. She was just watching them for fun and saw Roy. It's hard to project on animals personality traits that are human, but he was sort of arrogant and playful and full of himself. And he, to my mother, embodied my best friend. Cock of the walk, very attractive physically, very assured, but also fucking with you. She just was drawn to him and she sat and watched him in the pet store for an hour and was just cracking up because he would pick up a feather that somebody had dropped, bring it over to one bird, drop it down. That bird would go to pick it up, he would pluck it and run away. And she just thought this bird was the living end. He was hilarious and she was enchanted by him and just thought, that's Antonio in bird form. And I want something for my daughter who's living alone for the first time. I want the presence of her friend from Brooklyn. She bought him for me as a Christmas present. And we both were skeptical of each other. He wanted nothing to do with me, was very skittish. She liked to joke that she thought he was like wild caught in Australia with a net because he was missing a digit on one of his feet, which is very common for parrots. They come out of the egg and sometimes their digits don't fully form. They have 4 digits and he was missing half of his middle digit. I guess what would be the human middle finger. He was missing half of it. She used to fantasize that Roy was like out in the wild and got snared, and that was like the injury. But likely he was bred in some kind of mill for birds for corporate pet stores. It was a rough start because again, I didn't choose this. The first thought after it's mom, it's a bird was I'm going to kill this thing and I'm going to feel awful about it because I had this baggage around the family pets that we had and how we weren't able to care for them. There was a lot of chaos. And I just was like, this is the last thing I need is this living thing that I need to take care of that will probably promptly die under my care. And I will have to deal with that. There was a lot of the initial meeting of him, of course, being afraid and not knowing where he was and what was happening. He had been in this environment where there were many birds that he can fuck with and play with that were of his kind. And now there's just these like 2 women trying to coax him and talk to him, and he was not having any of it. We had budgies that also did not meet good ends in our household. There were birds that were in my room at one point when I was a kid, and my alarm clock was right on top of the cage, and it would go off and terrorize the bird. And just not good circumstances, lots of feet up discoveries in the morning of these poor little pet store birds. I had always had this affinity for birds. People would ask, are you a dog or a cat person? And I was like, I'm an owl person because of my name before I even knew the connection between the goddess Athena and owls. I was obsessed with the Clash of the Titans, the original one with Bubo, the mechanical owl, and Maggie Smith as Athena, just being like, I'm not sending my bird, I'll send this robot instead. I did have this awareness of the connection between myself and owls, but that connection was made more clear as I understood who I was named for and had always been obsessed with flight and birds, feathers, and definitely raptors, hookbill birds. I remember memorizing the raven in 7th grade and knowing it by heart. So I always had a kinship with flighted beings. When I was presented with Roy, I was like, I am seriously immediately going to kill this bird. He did have clipped wings initially, and then I read a lot of about the dangers of for wing clipping and how it really does put them in harm's way to remove their ability to fly. So I pretty quickly stopped doing the wing clipping and allowed him to fly free and just explore the environment. He was always skeptical of me, but he would sit on my shoulder and nestle up to my neck. He also really loved the legs of furniture, so he got cozy with the carved leg of a love seat at my mom's house. I would lure him with treats. I'd put them on my belly and just have him crawl there and hang out on my belly, and he would eat little seed treats and millet. It was a very slow process, and he was still very skeptical when I needed to go back to Boston. Over those first couple months, I just worked with him a lot and had him out with me even till the day he died, like 26 years of living with him. He still was skeptical of me, but I used to say that the thing that brought me the most joy was that when he was in danger, he would always come to me. I knew that we had that bond that he wouldn't let on because he had that kind of personality. I didn't land badly. That you're wrong. I meant to do that. He definitely had that affect about him. In those early days, it was hard because I thought, this bird hates me. It was slow going, but we bonded pretty hardcore. So that would have been the spring of 99. When I got home to my apartment, he was out and on my shoulder. I'd feed him. He let me hold him in my hand. He'd eat food out of my palm. And it was just a slow process of gaining his trust and really just being like, dude, I'm not trying to fuck with you. We're in this together. Neither of us chose this. I know I have more agency than you. Had been going through a really rough time. And so I think he kind of knew that. He would sing to me, he would talk to me. He didn't speak words, but he did the sort of R2D2 beep like sort of thing. He would also mimic the sounds of Boston, so fire engines, car alarms, like noises my phone made, beep boop, stuff like that. I don't know, me projecting or not, but he seemed to know that I was in a low place. And he definitely adapted more to coming to me, being with me, and generally not running away, which was nice, very affirming. It seemed at the time that we were both in a similar spot in our spirits where it's just, I don't know if I can trust you. I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but we do need to make the best of this and be friends. My family of origin is like many people's, just incredibly dysfunctional. There was a lot of fighting that continued beyond my parents' third separation, which led to their divorce. Then their divorce proceedings, their fighting with each other through lawyers went on for another decade, was an initial settlement. And then there was a continuing fight over who was paying for college. I had to save every receipt to justify. I also had to fight pretty hard to justify that I deserved to even be in school because I was, in a lot of ways, the black sheep in the family. And there was a lot of, what are we going to do about Athena? Athena's a problem. We need to solve this problem. My family had and still has an institutional business in my hometown, so public facing. My father, around the time when I was in school in Boston, he fled the country to avoid a bench warrant related to the divorce proceedings, sold the business to my brother for $1, took off, and was basically a fugitive in a low key way. When he came back to the country, my mother, who was quite manipulative, took my misgivings and worry about my father being abroad to encourage me to invite him to come to Boston to see me. He did come to Boston to see me, but then was like, "Oh, why don't we go to Virginia?" And I was like, "Yo, dude, no, that wasn't the deal. You were going to come to Boston where you're not going to be extradited from Boston." We ended up going to Virginia Beach, and then they got into it. He got in her face, and then she called the police on him. They arrested him, drove him from Virginia Beach to Richmond, put him in the county jail. And then, lo and behold, the major newspaper in my hometown, Richmond, Virginia, not a small place, former capital of the Confederacy, they put him on the front page of the paper. And the headline was "Troubled Exile Returns Home." And it was all about the bitter divorce between him and my mother, and listed my name and my siblings' names, and without any consent or talking to us, but whatever. Slow news day. It was this whole public thing where I felt very much indicted. And I think my mother played up my fears and concerns about my father being overseas, my worry about him being cut off and whatnot, my mother had insisted that I live by myself, which living by yourself in Boston, even in 1998 dollars, was a very expensive proposition. But I think she felt like I needed to be sequestered from the rabble. One of my sisters had basically gotten roped into doing a deposition stating that she didn't think that I was ready to go to college, that she was very opposed to me going to Pratt in the first place. She expressed her doubts on the record that I was equipped. And I'm like, yo, I was 17 when I went to Brooklyn. I'd never lived anywhere else. Is any 17-year-old equipped? There was just a lot of drama going on and contention around whether I had a right to be in school, whether my father should be on the hook for the money to pay for an education for a child who was inevitably going to fuck it up was the idea, even though I performed well despite what was going on. I got pulled out of Pratt after the first semester by him, and it was refusal to pay. I fought to get back there, missed a semester, did 2 summer sessions to make it up, spent another 1 year at Pratt before I transferred to Boston. So it had already been a pretty rocky road when I rolled into town in September of 98. I think I also just did not understand at that age that I didn't have to do any of this. It was their pressure. These were choices made for me that I am very grateful that I had access to that type of education, but it was not me filibustering for me to go to college. It was not me pushing for that. Roy came into my life that December. And I think that the sort of delayed response to a lot of that drama was rolling out in that spring. We had these fin style radiators. I'm not sure what the proper term is, but maybe it's like steam heat. I wasn't familiar with those, but he flew and hit the wall and slid behind the radiator and he was trapped. And I freaked the fuck out. I grabbed a wooden perch and I put it through the fins and he got purchased and I was able to kind of guide him up and he got out and then he immediately vomited. He was definitely in shock. I put him in a shoebox and my good friend that helped me name him actually, I called her, she came and we got a cab and took him to the emergency vet and they checked him out and they were like, he's fine. He's just in shock. After that, things really did change. I think he saw me as trustworthy. I helped him. He was so scared and I just remember spending a lot of time with him right over my heart, right up on my chest. As a skeptical guy and a big sort of pop dude, like for him to be vulnerable like that with me, because previously he would sit on my shoulder, but it was never like there was something about him being like below my face or over my heart that was really bonding and beautiful. We were like BFFs after that. It was really a turning point for us. Even previous to that, the sort of way he would communicate with me did seem to be like, hey, you dumb bitch, get out of bed. I was depressed and he was like, I need food. I need stimulation. Let me out. Cause he was free a lot. So when he was done being chill in his cage, he was like, yo, open the door. Hello, hello, hello. So he really did help me get up and get out because I was like, hey, this isn't just about me. He relies on me. He needs food. He needs attention. He needs to get out and fly around. And I can't just lay here being depressed about the state of my life and unsure about my destiny. This bird needs me. That incident happened. And after that point, when I was home, he was out. He was with me all the time. It was just a pretty intense period of bonding where I was like, yo, this bird, he was the reason that I did anything for a while. I was constantly entertained. He was so funny and he was kind of a bastard. He was never a biter. He wasn't aggressive with me in any way other than just being like, get away from me, like hairy eyeball. I'm looking at you with suspicion. He was just mischievous and just hilarious. And he did this series of whistles followed by he would bob his head and it would just crack me up every time he did it. And he mimicked all the environmental noises and was a source of joy for me that it changed so many things. It made my life so much brighter. My friends would come over and they had piercings and he would pull the ball out of their cage rings. He brought so much joy and fun. He was really well socialized. I'd have a bunch of people over and he would just hang out and want to see what everybody was doing. And then he'd fall asleep on somebody's knee and they'd be like, oh, he picked me to fall asleep on. And I'm like, I know, isn't that great? That person will feel like the belle of the ball because the bird is hanging out with them. It was delightful. I had a hard time. There was drama with some people that I was in school with in Brooklyn, and I'd been burned before by wanting to create some kind of family because my family was fucked. When I showed up in Boston, I was like, I don't want to know anybody. I'm just going to focus on my work. That's when friends come. I had met some really wonderful people I'm still friends with. And it was one of those things where I'm like, yeah, despite me not wanting or knowing that I would ever have wanted Roy in my life, like these friends, they came anyway. Love does crash like a wave and break down those walls. It does really show up when you do need it the most. Even if I wasn't ready to receive it, it was still there. That was definitely the early years of being with him. It was a lot of that sort of pushing through the fear to be vulnerable, to care about something. That was a sacred relationship in a time where I felt like all my gods were dead. For the first several months I had him, I had no idea what to call him. He just was the bird. My high school friend, Holly, she was younger than me, but she ended up going to BU. She was living in the dorm. She would come hang at my apartment, and we were just having a blast. And we watched a lot of Syphil and Ollie. After she met Roy, we were laughing about the Precious Roy home shopping network. And this is Precious Roy. I love the Indigo Girls, suckers. She might have even been the one to suggest it, but we saw a personality parallel between Precious Roy and Precious Roy. He was a young guy, but he was always a curmudgeon. He was always like, get off my lawn. When he was around other birds, he would just be like, you got something to say, punk? Come say it. He just had that attitude, even though he was not a biter or a fighter. There was something about that. It was really cute that Holly helped me name him and was just like, yeah, he's totally Precious Roy. We actually tried to teach him to say suckers, but he would just shake his head. I'm sure it was offensive because we were crowding around him stoned as hell, being like, suckers. Then I realized that I really didn't like the idea of teaching him to speak words. I liked his natural sounds. My mom got this creepy tape that was just a person repeating words, and then you'd flip it to side B, and it would be like, pretty bird, pretty bird, pretty bird. And I'm like, this is torture. This does not seem right to me at all. I don't need the bird to say something. It's already saying something. It's just not in English words. After I got Roy, my mother got really fascinated by cockatiels. She went to a breeder and got a hand raised bird named Luna, who was bred for her color. She was beautiful, but a lot of inbreeding causes health issues. And she was very sweet. My mother got her, loved her. Luna was incredibly affectionate because she was raised by humans and not by other birds. Then my mother got super active in the Republican Party of Virginia Beach and basically left Luna alone after giving her all this love and attention. And Luna's personality completely changed. She was always screaming when you went to pick her up. She was not trustful. She was the most sweet and loving bird. And I think she just was left in isolation in the dark. Cockatiels famously have night terrors when there's no light source. They flip out, flap around, hurt themselves, and it's not a good experience. Cockatiels always need a source of light so they can orient themselves. That sort of trope of covering cages, leaving birds in the dark doesn't work for cockatiels. And they do it in the wild. Lots of them will just have a night terror. She probably had a lot of night terrors unattended, uncomforted, and it really did change her personality as a very young thing because my mother got her when she was just 6 months old. My mother had brought Luna to visit Roy and meet Roy in Boston, and Roy was smitten. Cockatiels mate for life, and I think Luna was way too young probably to be sexually mature, but Roy was just trying to court her, singing to her, just, oh baby, sweetheart. I even made a joke that he was Humbird Humbird and she was Low Luna because it was a very inappropriate Lolita-like situation. He was very smitten. She left and went back to Virginia, and he was the most depressed I'd ever seen him. I had caller ID and voicemail on my phone, and there was a certain noise when you deleted information. It would go doot 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 dude. And he just started making that noise. He was so sad. He wouldn't eat. He was despondent. And I was like, I really think it's because Luna's gone. My mother ended up bringing Luna back, and Luna came to live with me. She and Roy were mated for life. She started laying eggs, but the eggs weren't viable. It was like Easter weekend. She laid 20 eggs, an insane amount of eggs. They were trying to care for them, but there were too many eggs. And I don't think she was sexually mature for them to be viable. She laid so many eggs. And then the next year, she laid a whole bunch more, again, not viable. At that point, I had moved to Mission Hill in Boston with two roommates, one of which was my partner. And they laid a clutch of eggs, and two of them were viable and hatched there in 2002. So we had, in addition to the families, we had Muffin and Spanky. And Spanky was actually Antonio's boyfriend's nickname for him. So Antonio's just in this story all around. He's the reason I got Precious Roy. And then Precious Roy's son, Spanky, was named after the nickname of Antonio's boyfriends. Muffin was so yellow, he looked like a buttered muffin. But Marcelo, Antonio's ex-boyfriend, he wanted to adopt them. So he named them. And they went to live with him in East Boston out by the airport. And then he later moved to San Francisco, took them with him. And at a certain point, he was moving to a place where they would not allow any pets. So he flew them back to me across the country and reunited them with me. And they lived out their lives here in Vermont. I was always tripped out by the idea of birds on an airplane. I had told him, if there's ever a time you can't care for them, I will always take them. And he was true to his word and brought them back across the country to me. Luna and Roy also had a second clutch of two babies, Sunflower and Dee. They were born in 2004 here in Burlington. Roy was predeceased by Luna and his four children. I suspect that the reason that they had shorter lifespans and medical problems was because of the inbreeding of Luna for her coloration. Luna was the first one to pass away. She was 13. And then Sunflower, her daughter, and then Muffin, then Spanky, then Dio. It was very strange because Roy clearly understood something had happened. It was very sad because Luna showed no signs of any illness. And then one day she was just on the bottom of the cage, almost as if she was just grazing, because cockatiels feed on the ground. So they're often on the bottom eating. And I was like, she's not moving. All the other birds were business as usual, and she was dead on the bottom of the cage. When I took her out to bury her, there was a lot of singing and vocalization. He was definitely calling for her, and she was not responding. I didn't know how birds mourn. I had seen behavior where birds will stay with their dead partner and they don't want to leave. But in this case, she was just alone on the bottom of the cage, and there was no one by her when I found her. That's the behavior I witnessed most, was the sort of, hey, hey, are you there? Where are you? And they don't hear a response and then go on living. It was devastating because I really felt like Luna got a raw deal. I don't know the circumstances of Roy's birth, but he did not seem to behave like other hand-raised birds I knew. One of my other birds, the last one of my flock, Sasquatch, who was not related to any of my other birds, he passed away in October of last year. Luna and Sasquatch both thought they were human. Because of that, it seemed like the other birds treated them with skepticism. I think that to see Luna go from so trusting, so loving, to completely different personality because she was left alone, I don't know that she was ever quote unquote right after that situation. She had health issues and I didn't expect her death. And I just thought, this is disturbing because her four children and her life mate don't seem to know other than to call for her. I can't explain to them why she's not here. And it was difficult to bury her. They're all buried under our maple tree in our backyard, but she was the first one there. I did know exactly how old she was. And it seemed like it was far too young for the lifespan that I had read about for cockatiels, which is 15 to 30 years, which is a pretty broad spread. She had also laid all those eggs in her little body before she was old enough, so I'm sure that depleted her physically. I understand the urge to breed for color. She was a Lutino pearl pied, so they breed for the shape of the markings on the feathers. So there's oval or circular spots, but she was yellow, gray, white, and the orange cheek patches, which are common. The normal gray cockatiel is yellow face, orange cheek patches, gray body with white throughout. But through genetic fuckery, they produce the most gorgeous plumage on these birds. But it does come at a cost, like any kind of inbreeding or pure breeding. She made beautiful babies with Roy. Roy, he came out looking like a normal gray cockatiel. And his children with Luna were varied because the sunflower was a cinnamon pied, and so her coloration was a pale beige, but she had beautiful pearl, yellow and white pearl markings on her feathers. She was gorgeous. Muffin was this brilliant yellow, eye piercing yellow all over his body, but he had white and gray marking on his wings, and then yellow mohawk, orange cheek patches. The Dio was a Lutino, which is a paler yellow but uniform yellow, so he didn't have any of the curling or the pied markings. The pied is just a more sort of wash tone on the wings. And then the unrelated bird, Sasquatch, was a completely gray and white pied. So he had no orange cheek patches. He was also much larger than the other birds. So my mom joked he was part eagle. Sasquatch was always an outcast, and so was Luna. And I do think that had to do with their socialization because they didn't have birds as parents, whereas Roy and Luna's kids were raised in tandem with myself, my partner, and them. I mainly left it to them to raise them, but we socialized them early. It was pretty incredible to watch them learn to fly. They go from being like completely improbable on a physics level. They have huge feet, huge beaks, huge eyes, and these big round bodies. They're all belly and they can barely walk. Then they get sleeker and sleeker. And at one point, Dio was the first one to fly of him and Sunflower. One day he put his wings out and he just went for it. And then the day after, Sunflower did the same. And it was incredible to see it because, like, their parents were teaching them how to fly, how to land. Luna was a good flyer, but she could not land. She would always crash into everything. Whereas Dio and Sunflower were both like ace flyers from the day they started. We had a ceiling fan that they loved to ride on. They were perched up there with their parents and they had like flown over there and then they're like, oh no, I can't get back to the cage. What am I gonna do? And they figured out how to fly. They breed in a nesting box and the male and the female take care of them. They won't defecate in the box overnight when they're with them. It's usually the female overnight and then the male will go in during the day. And every time one of them would emerge and they would change shift, the other one would take the most massive dump because birds have a cloaca and they vent their urine and their feces in the same product. It was basically like the normal poop, but 10 times the size of it, same composition. But I was like, I didn't even know that was possible, yo. You just because they don't want to soil their nest. And so I learned so much just watching them take care of their eggs and being so gentle not to pierce the shell when they rotate them. When I mentioned earlier that Roy was missing a digit, it's very common because the babies will get stuck against the side of the shell if they're not turned enough, and their digits don't develop properly because of that. They have to rotate them like pretty frequently for warmth, but also so that they don't end up sticking against the side of the shell. They sound like crickets when they're born. They're just this very, very like small chirping. He was the most proud papa. He was definitely nervous. He was so loving toward Luna. He would groom her. He would constantly be vigilant around the nest. It seemed to be like the highlight of his world. It made me so sad that his children went before him. He was very trusting. If he needed to go eat and drink and do things, he was okay with us having the babies. While he did that, he would be always looking. He was a very vigilant dude. He certainly seemed to trust that we would not hurt his offspring. It was like co-parenting with him and Luna. Luna definitely seemed to be less interested in her babies. Once she was done with the nesting process, she was just like, "Yep, going over here now, gonna yell at you." Like, "Gonna yell at you. Get out of my way." In 2013, she passed away, and then in 2014, Sunflower had the common issue with cockatiels is called sour crop, where there's a bacteria that infects their crop. And when they eat a seed, they take the seed meat and then it goes into their craw and then they macerate it. And then by elongating their necks, it then injects into their stomachs. And so it creates this very sour smelling discharge. And there's treatment that you can apply, but it didn't take for her. She was being aggressively courted by Sasquatch. So I separated her from the rest of the birds. We had a big handmade bird cage that was attached to the ceiling because they do graze, but they if you have them in the tall cage, they ignore the bottom. So we're like, hey, this would make more sense. They'll be up high where they feel the safest, but they'll still have a grazing area on the bottom. And so we had taken her out of that enclosure. It wasn't a long illness. She was born in 2004. So she was only 10 when she passed away. There was a disconnect because she had been separated from the rest. It was kind of like, oh, who? Which is why it's difficult to not be able to talk to them and communicate, to be like, hey, what's up? But yeah, she passed away. Luna had before her, and then her the next summer. Similar with Muffin and Spanky, they did not have discernible illness. It was very fast. I had read that most animals will try to hide any kind of illness from you. So signs you look for if they don't sit upright, if they don't vocalize, obviously eating and drinking. And with cockatiels, they'll roll their wings forward in a way their posture doesn't seem right because when they're healthy, they have a very specific pointy upright carriage. So we did various things to always separate a sick bird from the others because there is a pecking order, literally, and they will antagonize another bird if they sense that there's some illness going on. We separated out Muffin, Spanky, same thing with Dio. We had a dedicated medical cage with a heat pad and then raised the threshold of that cage up with zip ties so that there was a limited amount of space where they would have to move around. It's like bird hospice. With all of those cases, it was within 2 weeks of any kind of symptom to being separated to being deceased and taking them into the vet and getting medicine for Sunflower and then also medicine for Dio. It can be difficult to diagnose what's happening. There's also concern over spontaneous death with birds due to stress, where they will have basically a heart attack when being treated. So you always have to take that into consideration when you're taking a bird to a vet. They did receive really good care, so it can be difficult to find people that will treat birds, especially in a smaller state like Vermont. But I was really lucky because there were multiple places to take birds, and everyone was always very compassionate and also realistic about what you could do for them, and also that bringing them to the vet could kill them. I would always try to take them. And the unfortunate thing is just like, what can they diagnose without doing incredibly costly procedures on them, specialized care, because it's avian care. They would say we can do like a battery of blood work, we can do additional testing. And it was difficult to say, look, want to, I don't want to subject them to that, but I also can't afford to pay for specialized testing and then find out something and then not be able to manage it or treat it. I also had a great conversation with one of the avian vets about the fact that there was a reality with their parentage. Luna, a severe amount of inbreeding that she had to achieve her color to be a showbird really did set her offspring at a disadvantage. And so it was one of those things where these were common problems that the avian vets had identified in birds that were heavily inbred and their offspring. I said, look, it's quality of life for the birds, but also for us. We don't know how we can treat them. There's never ever going to be a situation where you feel, at least for me, where you feel like you did everything you could. In a different world, it's possible I could have done more to prolong their lives, but I also don't know what kind of quality of life they would have had if I were able to prolong their lives. Some things are quite common and other things are less common. But with sunflower, with the sauerkraut, the treatment there didn't seem to hit. It maybe it was because it was too far gone. So there is massive guilt because these birds were relatively young for their breed, but not so young considering their mother only lived 13 years, which is pretty short lifespan for a cockatiel, as far as I know. It's very telling that Roy presented as a less interesting and therefore less valuable bird because he's representative of how they look in the wild, which I just think is awful because Roy was gorgeous. Roy was sharp. He was such a smart guy. He had so much personality. I feel like we should not be messing with the gene pools of other creatures. There's a huge cockatiel breeding and show circuit. And yes, they are beautiful, but at what cost, man? You could say the same about humans. Beauty, at what cost? Suffering is inherent in that. How I came to being a bird owner was not really something I chose. And because my mother made a selection of a bird based on her beauty and also her loving, docile qualities because she was raised by the hand of man and not by other birds. That was a choice she made that then later affected my life with my bird because of the connection that they had, where Roy just was over the moon for this lady that he met. And maybe it would have been any lady he met, but I like to think, because I'm a romantic, that he was just like, she's the one for me and will always be my wife. But then the juxtaposition of that with how weirdly unaffected he seemed by her dead body. Sasquatch was a hand raised bird. I don't know that he knew he was a bird, and he was definitely ostracized. The other birds were just kind of always raised an eyebrow at him, but he was crazy, creepy smart. When we lived in Mission Hill, my room was at the back of the house, and they were usually out in the apartment, and he could find us in any room. You'd be talking to somebody in the front room, and all of a sudden he'd land on your head. He just wanted to be involved with whatever was happening with people and was like, "Hey, what's up? I'm here. What are we talking about?" My partner's bedroom was between my roommate Beth and then Andrea and then me, and one of those narrow Boston houses. He would fly from my room into her room, and she's an illustrator, and she'd be drawing at her desk, and he would land on her ponytail and chew on her hair tie. He loved hair ties. I think something about the mouth feel, the springiness. Then he would land on whatever she was trying to draw and try to eat her pen and try to eat what she was drawing. He come fly into your food and you'd be like, I can't eat that now. It's yours, man. Roy and Sasquatch were often at odds with each other, but they were the closest to me. And they were one on the shoulder, fighting over my hair in the back. It's interesting to me that they were the two that I had at the end. I won't know ever how old Roy was when I got him. I did a calculator online that tells you how much time between this date and this date. So December 21st, 1998 to the day he died, September 9th, 2024, was 9,395 days. I was just like, that's a minute, almost 26 years of sharing a life with another living thing. He gave me so much more than I gave him. Just sitting for hours with him, just falling asleep on my heart, him sitting on my shoulder, nibbling my earrings. He loved peanut butter. and I get the natural stuff without the added sugar and whatnot, and then I'd mix it with millet seeds, and he would go at it, and then he'd come up from his dish, and the peanut butter and the millet were globbed on his beak, and it looked like he had some terrible growth. Like, I mean, "Oh my god, what is up?" And then I'd be like, "Oh, it's just the peanut butter and the seeds." There were so many days, so many hours that were the best, way more good than any bad. He would really get into roaming, and he was the sort of leader guy. So if they were down on the ground, which I read was like a sign of security, they won't go down on the ground if they don't feel safe in their environment. So I'd be like, "Oh, good." But he'd go roaming and grazing on the carpet and go under the futon and start making like these little like exploratory chirps. It was a like bird calculation. We used to call it adding and subtracting, is it just sounded like calculations, but they were verbal. It was the most adorable thing because like he could just be under the futon for an hour, like walking around, just like calculating and mapping, surveying. The other birds would just follow him anywhere he went. He was like truly a leader among birds, and they would follow him into the darkest, most cobwebby like areas. They come out all cobwebby, like, I need to dust under there. It's like y'all came out with dust bunnies. He was a very playful, active bird. We were sad that when we moved into our house, we don't have ceiling fans because one of their favorite things was the birdie merry-go-round, the ceiling fan in our old living room, and they would just sit on it for hours. They could move it under their own weight, and they're so lightweight, but when they land on something, the force of flight just propels the fan around. So they would just go round and round, singing to each other, jumping from blade to blade. Right before he passed away, that summer, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a lumpectomy. Right after he died, I started radiation. I do feel badly that I wasn't more with him. I didn't know that he would be dying, but I knew he was an elderly gentleman. I wasn't sure how much time I would have because I wasn't sure of how old he was, but I knew that December would have been 26 years. Every major life event that I had, he was with me from the time I was 19 to the time I was 45. It was one of the most meaningful relationships that I've ever had. I talk to my partner all the time about how she had cats growing up and had a dog, and her mom had a parakeet named Archimedes. Great name for a bird. But she really had never thought about birds. And a lot of people really don't think about them. They have an opinion, maybe I don't like them, or I do. But she has talked at length about how much she appreciates being introduced to them and just how much she loves birds because of my birds. She was like their mom as well for so long and helped raise two clutches of children and interacted with them daily. They shit on everything she loved and nibbled her books, and she truly embraced and loved them. I always appreciate that she had that experience because you could be with someone who's just these birds, blah. She just really loved their personality, their charm. I think until you know a bird, it's easy to dismiss and say, "Well, they don't have a personality," or "They're just birds," or "Birds aren't real," or whatever. Like, I didn't coin the term, someone out in the world did, but they would call feathers butt leaves. And she'd be like, "I found a butt leaf. They dropped a butt leaf." Like, so time to harvest the butt leaves. Her the full embracing of them in her life, even when we were friends before we were partners. And she would come over and visit, and they walk around and poop on her. I would try to eat everything that she cared about, and we're up in her business. And she was such a sport about it to have a bird crawling around on your head. Maybe that was like the first clue that she was like the right one for me. If someone comes into your life and some part of your life is like offensive or annoying or something that they can't really deal with, that can really cause a lot of problems. So I'm not advocating for people to fully assimilate situations that make them uncomfortable, but I think she was open to loving them and really knowing them. And it was lovely. But to go from having one bird to having two to having four to having six to having seven, and her sort of complete and total coolness with that. Precious Roy, his personality and his whole being was so much bigger than his body. He was a titan. He was huge. And so losing him was, I knew it was going to happen one day. I thought it was going to happen several days after I got him. I thought our time together is short, man, but 26 years is crazy long. The day he died, he was at the bottom of this cage. I went to pick him up and he bit me. And like the times he bit me in our relationship were like less than 5 times. And only if he was like in danger. And that's how I knew that he was going and he was afraid. I don't even know if he could see anything anymore or he could hear anything anymore. And all I could do was try to keep him comfortable. Within the hour, he was gone. But I buried him with his favorite bell that he used to hate, love, hate, love. He attacked it all the time. He would yell at it. I don't know what his beef was, but I was like, you need to go to eternity with this bell because we all had a relationship. It was personal with that bell and a sprig of millet and a bunch of flowers. And it took me a week to bury him. I just had to keep him for as long as I could. I had put him in a basket with towels around him, covered up to keep him warm. He was on his back, which is not usually how you see birds. He passed away right there with me next to me. I wasn't trying to hold him because of the bite, and I just was trying not to stress him out more, but I was there with him.
What was it like to live without Roy at first?
I just kept thinking he was there. I had Sasquatch still. Sasquatch was acutely aware Roy was not there. We both lavished all the attention on Sasquatch and had him out all the time and held him, and he would let you pet him and I'd feed him Triscuits, and he just became the only child, which I think he did enjoy, but he definitely had a change of personality. It was very strange. When Roy passed away, Sasquatch's personality changed immensely. I made sure to present Roy to Sasquatch, so it wasn't like I just took him away because Sasquatch and Roy had lived together since 2001. They'd been in each other's lives for so long, and I didn't want Sasquatch to think that Roy just disappeared. People think birds are loud outside, but Lord, inside, it's like they're super loud. Hey, dude, where are you? I'm looking for you. Where are you? Even if you had to separate them in 2 different rooms or one flew into another room, it's just ear splitting. I didn't want Sasquatch to think Roy was just gone. He had seen other birds dead in his home. But in this particular case, because they were the last two, I felt like I should leave Roy there for a little bit just so Sasquatch could see him. After Roy was gone, Sasquatch was very aggressive. He started biting. He seemed angry at us. And he was a lot less responsive to like commands like step up and going back in the cage. And it was a real change in his personality. And also he was aging. He died a year later. It was hard because I could tell it really affected him that his friend was gone. I also highly suspect that Sasquatch might have been a gay bird. I think he loved Roy. He did try to like mount Roy a couple times, and Roy was like, "Get away from me." I do think that it was hard for him to be the last one when he'd been around 6 other birds for most of his life. It really hit me when Sasquatch was gone because our home had been filled with song and chirping and constant awareness of that, what would startle them, making sure there was always a light. For a year after Sasquatch died, I kept the light on at night because I didn't even think, oh yeah, it can be dark again. So there was that adaptation. With Roy, we just couldn't walk around the corner without expecting to hear him. and see him every day. It was really hard, but it was like he was still there because Sasquatch and Roy were a year apart, and Sasquatch was the last one. We talked about whether we would get birds again. It's a commitment for at least 20 more years. So it's quite the buy-in time-wise. I think a lot of pet owners say this idea that you're free in a certain way because there is a lot of worry and a lot of stress related to caring for and making sure that these sentient beings have the best you can give them. When they're gone, you're just like, I could go somewhere now and not have the caregiver for them. Then you feel immediately guilty about that because, like, yo, like, what kind of person? And I would love to have them back, but I also understand part of why they were so lovely and special is because they wouldn't be here forever. And it made me very grateful knowing, especially with Roy, because when we started out, I was so sure it would be short lived. And then 26 years later, I'm like, man, I couldn't have asked for more gravy on these potatoes. You have built your life around accommodating and caring for, being respectful and considerate of the creatures that share your space. And just realizing they're not there anymore. It's a 1-2 punch. One is relief and one is grief. So you have that sense of, oh, wow, yeah, like I, in this moment, really feel their loss, but I also feel like the gain of like having this worry and constant fear removed. There's a period on that sentence. There's nothing more that I can do for them except remember them. Pet grief is like next level. Does this living thing know how much I love it? Am I giving them a good life? Have I done everything I could do? And when you're a kid, you're as vulnerable in a lot of ways as they are. If you're an adult, it's like, I think also just with the structure of veterinary care, the expense, and the fact that even though there are like insurance policies and things, it's just a lot of times prohibitive and impossible for people. And that's a guilt that you carry because you're like, did I do everything? If I really love this animal, wouldn't I have leveraged everything I have to save them? And it's like, you can do that and it's still not enough. It's really intense that sense of like vapor where you swear you or hear them and it's so visceral. The muscle memory is a part of it, or the recall that you have of a safe space in your home where they walk back and forth 1,000, a million times. That sort of sense of ghosts existing that is beyond necessarily like a paranormal ghost. It's the thing that exists here in some part of my memory and time existence where the presence of this being is still here. I will keep finding feathers. I will keep having like phantom chirps and have reactions to actions I'm doing, even though the empty cage is sitting there. There's nobody there, but it echoes of these very special lives and the intensity of the bonds.
Where does he live on around you?
I have an altar that's just a collection of special things to me. And so his feathers are on there. Also, some of the eggs that were not viable, they're there. And those were laid in like 99. I think that's when Luna and him had their first clutch of eggs. And one of my sisters crocheted me a little cockatiel. He's buried there under the maple. So we have a bunch of black raspberries that grow around above where they're buried. I did consider briefly throughout the years, like from time to time, having him taxidermy, and then I was just like, I don't know though. I think he should go back to the earth, and who am I to stand in the way of that journey and put him on the mantle or something? I think I'd be creeped out. But I used to joke with him verbally. I'd be like, if I taxidermy you and they screw up your face, I will be so pissed.
What do you think of when you think of Precious Roy now?
A trickster god. I think I was like visited by like a deity that I had special audience with. a creature that would criticize the hell out of me if they spoke my language, but he let me know when he was not pleased. And I did everything I could do to appease him, like you would with a god. I definitely worshiped him. I think of him every single day and continue to worship him wherever he is. Always.
What did Precious Roy teach you about this life?
I needed him desperately. I didn't know I did. I'd like to think he needed me too. And that we've shared the joys of life and the sorrows of life and death and birth and all the different types of stimulation that he was exposed to that he maybe didn't want to be, like the different sounds and whatnot. And his just overarching sense of being alive. Like he just was such a living thing. It sounds funny to say it that way, but like just busted out of his little body and just larger than life in so many ways. I like to think of myself going to the church of Precious Roy and atoning and imagining the riot act that he would read me if he got the chance to say it in words I could understand. Just be like, you know, that purple phase you went through, I don't think that was too great. And also, I really hated that particular type of millet you used to try to feed me. I know you were a hippie at the time and you were at the grocery store and they had millet, but that's not the same millet. I wanted the spray millet. You got me the porridge millet. I've sometimes felt like he absolutely hated me, and if he could get away from me, he would want to. But then I also felt like he loved me because he showed me he loved me, or at least he showed me that he would let me hold him, let me touch him. He was never really into head scritches like Sasquatch was, but he would come and just sit over my heart, sit next to my neck, huddle up to me, hide in my hair. Those are the moments where I was like, I'm doing it. I'm really doing it.
If there is an afterlife where we do get to see our pets again and all the animals that we've loved, what will you say to Precious Roy when you first see him?
I was just imagining what Roy would say to me if we could speak the same language, if in the afterlife we just could communicate for real in that sense explicitly. And just thinking about all the things that he would say that are unflattering. Just I watched you make the worst decisions and I was judging you and you shouldn't have gotten me high all those times from passive marijuana smoke. And although he was hilarious when he was high, I don't advocate for people getting their pets high, but he was hilarious under the influence of weed. I think I would ask Roy, did you know I loved you?
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with your friends. If you have a dead pet that you'd like to share, please send an email to deadpetsofficial@gmail.com. Dead Pets is a Wild Media Industries production. It is written and hosted by me, Elise Wild. Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened. Anatola Franz.